Well, there is no shortage of things to talk about with what is going on here throughout the weather forecast for the next week ahead and beyond as we're getting closer to rolling combines across many parts of the U.S. Let's talk about how things are shaping up. We welcome in Eric Snodgrass from Nutrien Ag Solutions. Eric, good to catch up with you again this week. And let's talk a little bit about how this weekend went. I noticed on the radar quite a few areas of some shower activity working through parts of the Corn Belt, Eric.
Yeah, a lot of attention's being put on Hurricane Lee, which is out there spinning slowly well north of Puerto Rico, and it's going to be out. I mean, Jesse, we get kind of what we call storm fatigue, where we've already been talking about Lee for a week. It's going to be there
Mhm.
for another week before it even gets close to maybe late Friday, Saturday, Sunday, sometime during that time frame that it gets close to maybe Cape Cod or Maine, and then eventually New Brunswick and Nova Scotia. But what's going on is that that's drawn a lot of attention away from what happened over the weekend. So the rainfall totals this weekend were quite impressive. Up the East Coast, a lot of severe weather, but there's a front right now that's draped right across Iowa and Illinois. It's going to have some cool air behind it, but take a look at the rainfall totals that came out of parts of Nebraska, Colorado, getting into Kansas, Oklahoma, Texas. We've already had a couple of good rounds of storms. There's one rolling right through Texas this morning, early this morning as we're recording. And this isn't the end of it. There's a lot more rain coming to the middle part of the country. And it's about context, right? So this rain that's coming through this area is hitting some spots that have been extremely dry. And I think that's the main story here is who's getting the moisture and who's not. So if you look,
Well, let's
this,
talk about
yeah,
that a
go
little
ahead.
bit. Yeah.
Yeah,
Go ahead. Go ahead,
I'm,
Eric.
I'm
Talk
anxious,
about
man.
that
I'm
a
like,
little bit. You're anxious. You're ready. Give us the details. Put this into context for us.
yeah. Well, I do that because I'm anxious about it because if you look in the upper Midwest, look at parts of South Dakota and Iowa and northern Illinois and in Wisconsin, Minnesota. We have a huge part of where the water comes from for the Mississippi River that has not got any moisture in it. And while parts of Oklahoma and Texas and sections of Kansas are expected to be wet, we have too much of the Mississippi River drainage basin under drier conditions. So I just get worried about here is what it means for this map, what it means for the soil moisture data, which is very low as well. I mean, we've got a lot of places here that are in the lowest 2 percentile. So this is compared to historical averages in that area, which means our river doesn't have anything to flow into it. Now it'll be like last year. Okay, we'll be like, okay, good, drier now, we can harvest, and a lot of folks have been able to harvest early because of stronger winds. We had some warmer conditions in early September, so the crop is drying down pretty quickly in the field. But my biggest worry is what this means to the Mississippi River. So after the Ohio comes in, after the Missouri River comes in, we currently see, look on the right hand side of this diagram here, that the Mississippi River at Memphis is 9.9 feet below low stage. And a year ago right now, it was 1 foot above low stage, on its way by the end of October to being about 11 feet below low stage. So we are already knocking on the door of what we saw in terms of the worst levels last year in and around Memphis. Now, it needs to be a longer stretch of the river that are seeing these problems, but you could follow it all up to St. Louis and then back down, pretty far south into along the coast of Mississippi with the river, and it's just a problem. And
Hmm.
we need rain. We got to have rain to get on top of this. So that's the issue.
Well, let's talk about that. Let's look out here the next 7 days or so, Eric, and let's try to answer that question. Are we going to get any meaningful rainfall here in the next week or so where it could impact and help out the Mississippi River?
No, and that's because most of the rainfall totals are less than half of an inch. So we got rain coming through the Midwest. It's already rained this morning in Iowa. It's going to rain in Illinois, and we've got a front that's going to dive through and bring in chances for rain into the Midwestern United States. But most of the totals are low. You can see where Lee is going to go over there on the far right hand side. But take a look at parts of Oklahoma, Texas, New Mexico. We've got the Weather Prediction Center putting out here better than 3 inches in places. I mean, it's going to get some wet conditions on part of the winter wheat belt, but the Midwest is just not shaping up. And so we just think about this in the context of where it's going. We got to remember that month of September it's an up down month anyway. So it's a
Hmm.
transition month. We have the equinox coming up on, what is that? That's 10 days from now. So we'll officially start fall on that point. And so it's going to be a volatile ride going forward, but we're drier now. Could El Nino help kick off some late September and October rains? Yes, but it's going to be a while getting here. We're going to see most of this next 10-day stretch without much going on in terms of precip to the Midwest, even the Mid South too, and the Southeast.
Well, I have to think that could maybe open up a few harvest windows here across parts of the country with an early harvest. But Eric, I want to talk about a dirty F word, frost. That
Yeah,
potential is out there here over the next 7 days in a few parts of the country, isn't it?
yeah, this map isn't going to capture all of it, but it's going to give you a hint, right? So everywhere in gray on this map is where we're expecting the low temperatures to dip below 35 degrees, so 34 and lower. And what typically happens when you get down into the mid 30s, you have some patchy frost in places. We're going to get below that. We're going to see some temperatures actually dip below 32 in Wisconsin and the UP and Michigan. But we've got behind this cold front, which we hoped would knock Lee out to open ocean. Well, that cold front that comes through the Midwest, we're going to getting into some lows in the 40s across, I mean, big sections of the Dakotas, Minnesota, Iowa, parts of Nebraska, Missouri, Illinois, Indiana. I could just list them all off there. It's going to get chilly. Now, we're all going to love it because it's going to be beautiful sleeping weather, and most people are going to avoid a frost. But that's a reminder of where we are. It is not uncommon for the northern plains to get their frost in the last half of September. For much of the Midwest, it's usually a mid-October feature. But this is the beginning of two good shots of cooler air this week.
Well, I want to talk about South America a little bit. I want to make sure we have time to discuss what's going on in Brazil and Argentina. So I'll pull up one more map on the video feed, but walk us through what are we seeing down there? I've been hearing maybe some decent shots of rain in parts of Brazil and Argentina. This map looks like there's some fairly hefty totals. So what's going on in South America?
Yeah, so I was adding it up this morning, and if you go down to Rio Grande do Sul, so that's the Rio Grande of the South, it's the southernmost state in Brazil. It's the one that borders Uruguay and parts of Argentina. That particular state in the last 10 days has already been hit 3 times by excessive rain, and they've had massive flooding problems. Now they don't plant a crop that early down in southern. In fact, they have a wheat crop in down there that could be impacted by this, a winter wheat crop. The problem is as the map shows, they're expecting another 6 inches of rain over that same area. So this is going to continue to be a huge problem. Now, remember last week we talked about some growers getting early permission, excuse me, to plant early in parts of northern Brazil. But most of Mato Grosso, Goiás, Tocantins, Mato Grosso do Sul, they're not expected to get enough rain for them to really go aggressive and early. Most of the rest of those folks still have to sit on their hands until 4 days from now when they can start planting, and the heaviest rains are over like Bolivia or they're in the Amazon. They're not over a big section of Brazil that would indicate major, fast start to the season. Remember, Argentina is still dealing with drought, and so the winter wheat crop in Argentina is not as, it's probably going to be short, but it is important just to see here how much rain is coming into southern Brazil. So, what a disparity in rainfall overall across that continent.
Well, as you look long range South America or look at other issues going on around the world, anything else standing out to you right now, Eric, that we want to keep our eyes on here as we near the middle of the month of September?
Yeah, let's just do a quick world tour here. Okay, Europe, hot this week after major flooding like in Greece the last 10 days. They're going hot and they're going stormy west. So a lot of rainfall coming in there. The second part of this is if you look over into India, major late season surge of moisture that could hit central India, which is very rare this point in September. Go to Southeast Asia, a lot of flooding. They got hit by 2 typhoons. There's been major flooding in parts of China, but the North China Plain, Manchurian Plain, not hearing any news out of that. Australia, drier, but that's what we expect when there's an El Nino. And then you come back to the Atlantic where we started this whole discussion today. Even though we're at the peak of the hurricane season, which is really today, that's this whole week. This is the peak in the season. That tells us two things. We've got the rest of the season to go, but right now, the second thing here is that it's a bit suppressed. But just remember, we've not yet seen anything massive come out of the Gulf of Mexico and hit Texas or Louisiana. Idalia hit Florida, right? So we got to keep an eye on the Texas coastline, the Louisiana coastline, because the ocean temperatures are still over 90 degrees Fahrenheit down there. So that's where we sit globally, and it's what keeps my job interesting, right? There's something new every day.
Well, I was going to say, if something were to impact the Gulf states there, that could potentially change some of the moisture pattern flows there on the Mississippi. Like we were saying, it all depends on a storm track. We'll just have to keep our eyes open. Eric, I know as well, folks want to sign up for your weekly newsletter. They can, or they could find some of their latest forecasts at ag-wx.com, can't they, Eric?
That's right. Yeah. And just to get you ready, we're going to start talking a lot about winter in the next few weeks because I'll be
Ooh,
honest with you, my top thing to think about here is how much of the drought area gets reduced this winter. And I've got some projections on that. And we'll talk about it the next couple weeks.
that sounds great. Eric Snodgrass, Nutrien Ag Solutions, thanks so much for joining us this week. We'll talk to you next week.
Yeah. Thank you.